One game series I've always wanted to get into is the Yakuza series. I own all of the games in the series in one form or another, and it seems like something that's right in my wheelhouse. So instead of playing any of those, I picked up Judgement, made by the same developers as the Yakuza games, but in a completely different series with a fairly different premise. In Judgement, you play as a detective named Yagami, a disgraced ex-lawyer that is just trying to make it in the world by doing odd jobs, helping people for the right amount of yen, of course. Today, I'm going to go over the gameplay, open world, story, and graphics plus music in the world of Judgement. By looking at these categories, I'm hoping to see where it ends up on my list and what my recommendation is regarding the game. For a detective game, Judgement is pretty violent. Just walking down the street will cause randoms to attack you, and I mean, of course I'm going to fight back, I need that SP. But really, a large part of Judgement does involve the combat where you're fighting one-on-one or in groups to progress through the game. The combat starts pretty simple, but the more I went ahead and unlocked new skills, the more I realized that each fight truly was unique. Some enemies have weapons, sometimes you're fighting 6 or 7 people at once, sometimes you're only fighting one person but they have 4 health bars. The combat is really fun overall, but there is a lot more to this game than that. Besides combat, you are also acting as a detective. This involves looking around the surroundings and finding evidence to help support the case you're on at the time. You also are able to follow people in 2 different ways. You can take the quiet and stealthy approach, but sometimes you have to make a mad dash through the city to catch the perp. This tends to be pretty easy, but where it really matters is when you're trying to present evidence on the case. You'll scroll through the evidence you've collected, and you need to make sure that you're pulling the correct and relevant data for the arguments you're trying to make. On top of all of this, there's even more to the game. There are arcades and bars where you can play all sorts of different games, and it's really interesting. This game has a ton of different factors of gameplay, and honestly, I find all of them pretty dang fun. I want to give the gameplay 66 points. Like I mentioned before, in this game there are arcades and bars where you can play different games. This is truly just an introduction to how open the city of Kamurocho is in Judgement. Besides the places I mentioned, there are restaurants and even just random buildings you can go into and walk around in. Of course, all of this would be worthless without something to do. You actually can get upgrade points just by eating food off the menus at some of the locations in this game. This is also one of the ways that you're able to find new side missions in the world. The side missions tend to be pretty similar and just follow the game's main mechanics as far as combat and detective work, but it does take you to new stores and other general locations you don't normally get to see, and can introduce you to new friends. That's right, there's a friend and relationship system in this game. I only tried to get in a relationship with one person that was available, as I couldn't figure out how to get anyone else in one, but it was interesting how some of the social interaction and dialogue options played out whether it was with a friend or a potential partner. I haven't even yet talked about the drones in this game. There are some missions that require you to use a drone to watch your target, but the most fun part of the drones are the races you can go through. There's even an upgrade system for the drones so that you can make the best drone possible for these races. In general, the city of Kamurocho is really fun to explore and actually really easy to navigate. Judgement does implement the traditional open world minimap, but honestly I didn't always need it. The city is laid out in a way that makes sense, better than some actual cities I've been to in my life. Overall, the city of Kamurocho is pretty expansive and there is a lot to do in it. I may not love 100% of everything there is to do in the game, but I was very rarely bored. Because of this, I'm giving the open world aspect of this game 64 points. The story in Judgement is a long one, but I have to say, there wasn't a point where I was just trying to rush through it. I always was interested in what was next. The story revolves around an ex-lawyer named Yagami who is now a detective. He gets a case to defend a Yakuza captain, and everything just kinda spirals from there. You get to meet a colorful cast of characters, from Yakuza family bosses to long-term lawyers to even underworld crooks. The characters' dialogue and how you're able to interact with them is really fun. The story is also where you get to really do your best detective work. You even get to the courtroom every once in a while, although if you're expecting anything like Phoenix Wright, you're going to be severely mistaken. The court case mostly leads itself thanks to the detective work you did, but there are fun key moments where you get to present evidence and you better try to present the right stuff. All of this is just around the main story as well, and I haven't even gotten to the side missions and friendships you can develop. I talked about them initially in the previous section, but I do want to mention them here as well, as there are some really interesting story beats that can happen. Specifically when you're talking with potential friends or romantic partners, you can end up learning really deep things about people's goals and ambitions. And these things all seem completely reasonable, or at least as reasonable as could be in a game world where you're guided to meet these types of people. If I had to complain at all about the story, it might be a hair too long. I never want to rush through it, like I said, but at the end when I reflected on everything, I kind of realized, oh, that was a long game, and I guess it didn't really dramatically twist or turn much at the end. The story ended very predictably, and that almost just adds to the believing of this world, actually. So all of this considered, I'm going to give story 59 points. I struggle sometimes with whether or not I should bring up graphics and music in games. I did not have that struggle, however, for Judgment. Starting with the music in this game, I'll just say combat music is sick. I really loved getting into combat just to hear the interesting music. However, getting out of combat and listening to the audio in the rest of the game is a little less interesting. I wouldn't call the music bad, just not as exciting as the combat music. This may be a design choice, but it's not something that hit me right. Looking at the graphics, they look pretty good, I think. Something I would expect from a game out on the PlayStation 4, but I wouldn't argue that they astound me like some other games. I do, however, like the variety in the graphics. Each location does truly feel different, and you can tell that there is a large amount of work that went into making that so. Each restaurant has a different feel, each bar, each arcade, they all feel like their own unique areas instead of just some assets copy and pasted around the entire map. With all of this in mind, I'm going to give the graphics and music 58 points. I've wanted to play Yakuza games before, and instead I decided to pick up Judgment by the same developers. Let me tell you, I'm really happy with that decision. Between the gameplay at 66 points, open world at 64 points, story at 59 points, and then the graphics plus the music at 58 points, this game lands itself at 247 points, which is actually towards the higher end of my list. It's above games like Fire Emblem Three Houses and God of War, but it is still below games like Control and Super Mario Odyssey. I think this is the perfect spot in my list for this game, and I definitely enjoyed. I'm very happy it's in my top 10 of all time list right now. With all of that being said, I definitely want to give the game a play it rating recommendation. I highly recommend that people play this game and enjoy it however you want to really play it. Now, thanks for watching this review video, and make sure to hit the subscribe button to see what other content I put out. You can also follow me at RedWolf Player on Twitter to get random life updates and updates on the new content I'm working on. Have a good one.